2020 and the 12th supplement to mayoral proclamation declaring the existence of a local emergency dated February 25th, 2020. Before we proceed further, I'd like to ask our staff member, Ronald Contreras, who is acting as our moderator, to explain some of the rules for public comment at today's remote meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The meetings of this minute will reflect that due to COVID-19 health emergency and to protect Commission members, city employees, and the public, the meeting rooms of City Hall are closed. However, Commission members and staff will be participating in today's meeting remotely. This precaution is taken pursuant to the various local, state, and federal orders, declarations, and directives. Commission members will attend the meeting through video conference and participate in the meeting to the same extent as if they were physically present. Please note that today's meeting is being streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Once again, today's meeting is being streamed live online at sfgovtv.org/ethicslive. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Comments or opportunity to speak during the public comment period are available via phone call by calling 1-415-655-0001. Again, the number is 1-415-655-0001. Access code is 146-063-3265. Again, 146-063-3265, followed by the pound sign, and then press pound again to join as an attendee. You will hear a beep when you are connected to the meeting. You will automatically be muted and in listening mode only. When your item of interest comes up, dial *3 to raise your hand and be added to the public comment line. You will then hear, "You have raised your hand to ask a question. Please wait until the host calls on you." The line will be silent as you wait your turn to speak. Ensure that you are in a quiet location. Before you speak, mute the sound of any equipment around you, including television, radio, or computer. It is especially important that you mute your computer if you are watching via the web link to prevent feedback and echo when you speak. When the system message says, "Your line has been unmuted," this is your turn to speak. You will hear staff say, "Welcome, caller." We encourage you to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you change your mind and wish to withdraw yourself from the public comment line, press *3 again. You will hear the system say you have lowered your hand. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and mute you. You will hear your line has been muted. Attendees who wish to speak during other public comment periods may stay on the line and listen for the next public comment opportunity and should raise their hands to enter the public comment line by pressing *3 when their next item of interest comes up. Public comment may also be submitted in writing and will be shared with the Commission after this meeting has concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. Written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Once again, written comments should be sent to ethics.commission@sfgov.org. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Call the roll. Agenda item number 1. And I should add before you start that Commissioner Smith has once again been excused from this meeting. She, of course, as we spoke last time, resigned effective February 1st, and we are awaiting word from the district attorney as to her replacement appointment. Hopefully that person will be sworn in before our meeting on the 12th. And I wanted to ask Director Pelham, when you do get word about who that individual will be, if you can contact them and provide the materials that you're sharing with us today so that they have an opportunity to begin to understand the budget. I'd appreciate that. So go ahead. Ronald, we seem to have lost you. And in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and call the roll while we're waiting for you to reappear on our screen. Chair Ambrose, present. Commissioner Bush,
Present.
Commissioner Chu,
Present.
Commissioner Lee, Vice Chair
Present.
Lee.
Present.
Thank you very much. With that, we have a quorum, and I'm going to gavel the meeting to a start. Thank you, and want to welcome the public's participation for this special meeting. I also want to remind my fellow commissioners and participants, if you mute your microphone when you're not speaking so we can avoid feedback during the meeting. And I am going to now call agenda item number 2, which is public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Members of the public who are already on the line and wish to speak should now dial *3 if you've not already done so to be added to the public comment line. And before I ask the moderator to proceed with the instructions for public comment, I did want to just advise that there were public comments submitted to the commission that were included in the agenda package, so they're available online through the Ethics Commission website. In addition, Commissioner Bush also submitted comments in writing in advance that are available through the agenda link for any members of the public who would like to see that. And with that, Mr. Contreras, if you would please read the instructions for public comment.
Okay. Just testing to make sure that I can be heard and I can be seen. Is that correct?
Yes, you're
Okay,
back.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The Ethics Commission is now receiving public comment on agenda item number 2 remotely in this meeting. Each member of the public will have up to 3 minutes to provide public comment. If you join the meeting early to listen to the proceedings, now is the time to get in line to speak. If you have not already, please press *3. It's important that you press *3 only once to enter the queue, as pressing it again will move you out of the public comment line and back into listening mode. Once you are in the queue and on standby, the system will prompt you when it's your turn to speak. So it's important that you call from a quiet location. Please address your comment to the commission as a whole and not to individual members. Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are any callers in the queue. If you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on agenda item number 2, public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. Stand by. Madam Chair, there are no callers in the queue. You are muted, Chair.
Thank you. With that, public comment on agenda item number 2 is closed, and I would like to call agenda item number 3, presentation, public hearing, and possible action on Ethics Commission budget priorities for the fiscal year 2022, July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. Chair, no, that's me. Director Pelham, if you would please lead the presentation. Thank you.
Right. Good morning. Thank you, Chair Ambrose and Commissioners. Good morning. This item is appearing as a public agenda item sooner in the calendar year than it typically has in the past. And that is largely due to a new ordinance that took effect last year that's described in the staff memo under agenda item number 3. The Board of Supervisors last year passed an ordinance in late 2019, passed an ordinance with the goal of increasing public participation and awareness about the city's budget process. And so this year is the first full year where it's taken effect in earnest, I think. So the budget season itself now is kicked off in earnest. Last month, I think at our commission meeting, I noted that the mayor was issuing budget instructions to all departments, as is the case every year. And those instructions form the basis for how departments start developing budgets and departmental budgets that are required to be submitted the third week of February, mid-February. So this meeting today, as you know, was scheduled in order to enable the first of 2 public hearings on Ethics Commission budget items. This public hearing is specifically designed for public input, to solicit public input on budget priorities. The commission will have a second meeting at its regular monthly meeting in February, and that will be a meeting where we talk more about budget proposals. So in order for this meeting to provide public information, a base of information for those who may not have been following the commission's budget related topics in the recent months, we put together a slide presentation that I wanted to just highlight briefly for context, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions following any public comment that you might receive or however you might wish to proceed with today's meeting. But the memo that is attached to the slides recaps the budget instructions that all departments received. As you know, the mayor issued instructions that identified a $653 million budget deficit for the city. That continues, I believe, to be a fluid situation given the ongoing pandemic and costs related to that and the economic hit that the city and the region has been taking as a result of the pandemic. And the instructions issued by the mayor also identified specific priorities that the mayor wishes to see the budget she proposes in May to include. That is, 1, supporting small businesses and economic recovery, 2, prioritizing programs with demonstrated outcomes that are centered around equity, 3, implementing homelessness and mental health programming, and 4, continuing to respond to COVID. So these were the mayoral policy priorities that were identified in the budget instructions. In the instructions, there were also directions to city departments to submit in February budgets that reflect a series of reductions. First, a mandatory reduction proposal of 7.5% of departmental's general fund support. An additional 2.5% contingency that would also result in essentially a 10% cut to current general fund support for city departments. The budget request that the mayor is asking to see, and is something that we have done every year, will prioritize core services and present clear trade-offs and the impact of those trade-offs should they have to be made. Proposals this year in the instructions can include savings from contracts, other operational efficiencies, revenue sources, reduction in personnel costs, including a reduction in filled positions. I'll talk more about that momentarily, but that is something that traditionally has not been identified in prior budget instructions. This year is a different year, and so that was included specifically. Also, to describe budget proposals through an equity lens, and identifying that internal racial equity work that has been a priority for the city over the past year through the submission of our racial equity action plans, that work should be prioritized within existing budgets. So today's hearing, we are hoping to provide information that will start the conversation with those who are interested in following the commission's budget. As Chair Ambrose noted, we did receive public comment, and that is attached, linked in our website under the agenda item for today. We also have Commissioner Bush's comments, as the chair also noted. We will have our next hearing in February, on February 12th, I believe is the Friday, the regular scheduled meeting date. So with that, if I may, I'd like to just turn to sharing the slide deck with you and just to walk through that. So if Ronald, if you can let me know once that has been shared and visible, that would be great.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. The first thing we wanted to do was just to provide a snapshot, an overview of existing funding and full-time equivalencies or position authorities, FTEs as in city speak. This chart shows a distribution of the current staffing resources by position and how they are allocated throughout the various areas of the Commission's work. So the pie chart on the right shows, for example, that 24% of our staffing are assigned to our engagement and compliance work, dedicated to that work. 16% of our staffing positions are dedicated to audits, and so forth. The table on the left shows our operating budget for this fiscal year and the number of positions and the attrition savings target overall FTEs that are allotted to us. I should just note that the attrition savings target is a concept that you will recall is a structural concept in city budgeting, where departments have a certain attrition savings formula that they are also required to meet. And the attrition savings is essentially built on the notion that departments will have movement, that people will leave positions, that positions will stay vacant for a while because of salary retirements or moving to other positions in the city or stopping city service. So there is a target every year that translates to 1.97 positions essentially. So that's another savings that is required on top of the contingent. On top of the targets that were identified earlier. That 10% target plus attrition savings is essentially what the Ethics Commission would be required to reflect in the budget that's submitted. This slide helps perhaps clarify that a bit more. Again, our base operating budget going forward under the mayor's proposed budget instructions would reflect these cuts shown in red based on this attrition savings target, which is taken from the commission salary and fringe account, the 7.5% cut, the 2.5% contingency cut. The total proposed cuts for the Ethics Commission under the mayor's proposed budget instructions at present would be around $733,000. This slide also, I should point out, notes that 85% of the Commission's operating budget is attributable to salary and fringe. We're not a department that has large contracts, multiple contracts, other types of services that we provide. So we are essentially, we achieve our work essentially through our staffing, which is 85% of our budget. Attached to the memo on the agenda.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, Chair, Director Pelham, could you go back a slide? I just had a question about FY23 and FY22. So the total proposed cuts in 22 are about 734,000. And then in FY23, it's 741. Is that an incremental like 8,000 to get from 733 to 741, or is that an additional 741?
That would be the total amount of cut reflected in FY. Yeah.
So it's the between the 2 years. Okay, thank you.
Yes, the change essentially reflects in the attrition savings line, salaries and fringe, which would be some marginal adjustment in salaries.
And then in terms of attrition savings, because we have had, over the last, several years, vacancies. And so is our attrition savings in our current run rate at or about what the target is?
No. And I think we can, if you don't mind, I'd be happy to address that in more detail when we get to the approaches that would theoretically be required under these cuts. The short answer is that the attrition savings, it would still require significant attrition savings than we would otherwise have available. Thank you. Okay. As I was just indicating, this is just a refresher. I won't walk through this slide, but this is a summary of the information that is attached in a Word document form with the agenda material as attachment 1 to the memo. This is here primarily to help frame the breadth of the charter-based duties that the Commission currently has, as it has been established and amended over time. So these are the various areas where the Commission has explicit duties and responsibilities as identified in our charter. So when we look at how we would potentially have to weather the 10% plus the attrition cuts that are identified in the mayor's budget instructions at this point, we looked at a number of variations on how that might be accomplished. And we did that in a way to try and provide some context to think about how these trade-offs might have to occur and what those trade-offs might translate to in terms of an impact. So I do want to stress at this point that these are theoretical. This is an effort to try to provide some sense of what these cuts would look like in real terms for the commission. In every scenario that we looked at, there will have to be $733,000 in cuts achieved. The only way that we can do that is by touching salaries. And the only way we can do that is by touching salaries of positions that are also filled at present. But when we have to look overall at the options that we have, we've identified, for purposes of this discussion, a base reduction that would exist across all approaches that we've identified for purposes of today's discussion. And that is that we would have an administrative support base reduction, meaning that staffing that is focused primarily on departmental administrative support to our department would have to be eliminated. There are positions that are focused on providing a lot of programmatic support. There are others that are focused on providing administrative support. If we were faced with having to make a judgment about these kinds of severity of cuts, we would have to make decisions about retaining positions that enable us to do soup to nuts, whatever type of work we might need to do, because we would be facing some serious restructuring about how we go about doing our work. The impact here is that, of course, we would be faced with having a much reduced ability to provide on-demand responses for requests for information. There would likely be revenue collection delays as we have new programs that we have to, new processes we have to implement and to be absorbed by other staff. Procurement and payments for goods and services, although not a large part of our budget, can be time consuming, and those would be delayed as well. And then, of course, it translated to a reduction in staffing hours available for programmatically focused work by staffing that are not traditionally dedicated to doing administrative focused work. So that would be a base reduction you will see throughout on the left-hand side of these slides. In order to reach the mayor's $733,000 targeted cut, yes.
Director Pelham, I mean, we can talk about how you would prefer if we hold all of our questions to the end, but I think since that base reduction does carry through all of yours, I just want to make sure we understand how many positions is that, and what do you, I'm not sure I exactly know what you mean by administrative support. You mean people who answer the phone, people who make copies? I mean, how many people is that? I'm not sure what that is exactly.
Thank you for the question, and I'm happy to answer questions as we go through, since if it's top of mind and relevant for the conversation. The positions that we have in the office that are identified in this administrative support role would be positions that handle payroll, that handle front office, what you would consider front office reception, and would handle a process for collecting fines. So there would be 3 positions that would have to be reduced in this scenario.
Okay, we can come back to that. I just want to be more clear in my mind about what we're talking about, because I think, frankly, if you offer that up in all of your base cases, you can be assured that the mayor's budget analyst will take you up on that.
I think there are a number of very difficult scenarios. I'm not sure which of them they would take us up on, but clearly under this scenario, we will have to come up with $733 $1,000 in cuts in order to even submit our budget. Because as I mentioned last month, the city's finance budgeting system does not allow you to submit what you are seeking. It only allows you to submit figures for what the mayor is asking.
In compliance. I understand. I just want to make sure that, as I said, anyway, then I want one more clarification. So what you're saying is you're not going to be able to provide, alternative ways of getting there to the mayor's budget analyst. Our goal is going to be to submit the least disastrous budget that complies with the mayor's cuts. The system doesn't allow you to say choose between two unfortunate alternatives.
That's right. The system says, show me the money, tell me
Okay.
the dollar amounts, and then explain the impact of those cuts.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
there will, in order to achieve these cuts, there will need to be an explanation of how those cuts would be made if they were actually imposed. There, however, is a second part to this, which is also what do we submit in February? We will submit the numbers. As you know, we will also submit a very detailed document through a cover letter and a narrative that explains what we are actually proposing to be the Ethics Commission budget, which, as you'll see later here, is very different from what the cuts would impose on us. So maybe if as I finish the rest of the
Okay.
approaches, we can come back to clarifying that a bit more.
All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good.
So under one,
I'd like to, that clarification. You're talking only in terms of cuts, but you're not talking in this document of any revenue enhancements. Is that correct?
in this document, I am not talking about revenue enhancements at this point. That's correct.
But that is part of what is submitted. Is that correct?
Yes, they are open to achieving the number by enhancing revenues if departments wish to seek revenue enhancements. Yes, that will be a part of it. That is not a part of this slide that we discussed preparation today for a discussion about priorities for the commission. We've been looking at this from trying to explain what the impact programmatically would be with what we have in front of us now and what resources we have available now.
So the reason I'm asking for that is to clarification about seeking grants and outside funding sources or work orders from other departments.
I'm again happy to continue that conversation. That isn't something that we're focused on in this slide for reasons I can describe perhaps when I describe what we are asking for and maybe what the strategy going forward would be. But yes, that is not included in this document for today's conversation at our end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So under the proposed cuts that the mayor's budget instructions indicate, there are several approaches in addition to the base reductions we would have described in the prior slide. This would be saying if we had to achieve those kinds of cuts with our existing resources, we would have to take a look at essentially eliminating 75% of our audit staffing. That would mean we would have a significant impact on the oversight role that the commission can perform as an independent oversight body. When it comes to campaigns, we'd have a reduction, if not an elimination, for some period of time in the discretionary campaign audits that we would be performing because we would not have revenues to do that. We would not have staffing to do that. There would be, again, a significant concern about the lobbyist compliance oversight that we are charged with under the charter, or under the ordinance rather, with providing conversations we've had about establishing our lobbying audit program so that it's functional and sustainable. We are still working to do that. We would not be able to do that if we had to eliminate our audit staffing. That would be significantly impacted. It could be suspended for some period of time or simply delayed for some period of time, neither of which would be a solution, of course, that is optimal, to say the least. There would be no change in the oversight of city officials' financial disclosure forms because the program that we're working on currently to do that envisions that there would be work done in that area by our audit staff after the hiring of our audits and our audits and compliance review manager position. So there would be significant impacts of this sort were we faced with having to make a decision to reduce our audit staffing to reach the target that's in the mayor's instructions. Another approach, again, building from the base approach of having to cut administrative positions, would be that we would be, if we were to retain our focus on, we must do our audits, for example, because that's an essential oversight that we're here to provide. Another alternative, in theory, could be to reduce our engagement and compliance programs, and that would translate to 67% level cut in existing staffing levels. So we would essentially have two positions left in our engagement and compliance division to do all the programmatic work that is currently being done across all of our program areas, from outreach, pre-filing assistance, compliance guidance, training, and informal kinds of advice and compliance assistance questions. So we would most likely have to very much tamp down on any kind of available phone advice. There would be significant delays in completing assistance. We'd have to set up appointments and be pretty restrictive about when we can do that. We would essentially be reduced to providing just the most basic filing officer duties across all of our program areas. And training opportunities would have to be diminished. That, of course, could mean a resulting cost increase to those folks who are trying to comply, both in terms of time, heartburn, and actual dollars if they have to seek guidance elsewhere for the work that the staff otherwise might be providing them. And the public, of course, needless to say. And as a result, enforcement actions could likely increase if we find that there are more instances of noncompliance as a result of our inability to provide the kind of pre-filing assistance and support that we believe is necessary and helpful to keep people complying with the laws. A third approach would be something that would have to focus on reducing positions that are directly supporting the citywide's e-filing Form 700. That, as you know, is a program that we've started. We had to pause. We're now back on track with getting that ready for January 1st, 2022 implementation date. The inability, if we had to look at cuts that included that did not touch engagement and compliance, that did not touch audits, for example, under this scenario, positions that are affecting the implementation of the citywide e-filing project for city officials, public disclosure forms of their financial interests, the public transparency that we're gaining by achieving that project would be blunted. There would be limited oversight as a result. It would be essentially status quo, which is not what we have been working to do, and filing and technical assistance that is being rolled out in tandem with that project would be reduced. Lastly, there's an approach that would say, well, we just have to sort of throw the cuts office-wide. Let's just sort of, broad-based cuts that would spread the required reductions, or the targeted reductions across all program areas. This would mean that, for example, we would have one position only in the policy position. We would not be able to hire the second policy position. That would result potentially in the development, and the enactment of solutions around policy and legislation to help address corruption issues would be not possible. The commission would have a delayed, if any, ability to actively be engaged in addressing those policy issues that have been identified in the controller's report and other investigations that are ongoing with full and timely input, compromising the commission's bottom line, compromising the commission's ability to be an independent voice in policymaking in the city on these very important issues, which it has significant interest and expertise. Again, the Form 700 process would be delayed. There'd be a reduced ability to campaign audit committees as audit staff, and a position would have to be eliminated. An engagement and compliance position would have to be eliminated. And information technology support would be reduced across all program areas. And I think this is one of those areas where the people who regularly interact with the commission as filers or as the public know the significance of having an information technology division that can nimbly and fully and thoughtfully respond to additional public disclosure requirements that we have created or that are thrown our way in order to make our city's ethics, campaign finance, and lobbying laws work in practice and be accessible to the public with information that's meaningful and helps equip them to be effective players in our city's processes. These would be program cuts across all areas. So let me pause there for just a moment. That's, again, that's a lot of information, and those are a lot of hypotheticals about how we would have to achieve the cuts that are in part of the mayor's budget instructions. We will do that. We've done that every year, and we will identify what the impact would be if, again, those cuts were imposed. In the past, we have submitted budgets reflecting those kinds of cuts, and they have not been, in fact, imposed on us. That is one potential outcome that could happen this year, that we submit these, and that, in fact, in the budget process, those cuts are not taken because decision makers recognize the significance of those cuts and the impact, and they're not willing to go down that road because they don't believe it's good for the city. Secondarily, Separately from that, we also, though, have the responsibility, as the commission has discussed in past meetings, to be very clear about what it is that we do need. And so we will go through and identify those cuts and their impacts. But importantly, we are also here to remind the public and to have a full and rigorous discussion and debate about what the commission actually needs to do its work. And as this slide and the next identified, we know that there is still resources that are needed to do the basic core work that the charter identifies for us. So this slide speaks to the fundamental training and support that we are under the charter expected to do in terms of providing support, education and training for city officials on ethics and the importance of ethics to an effective and accountable government. We are, again, as we did last year, identifying that we believe the Ethics at Work program, that we've labeled it as Ethics at Work, is a program that we believe is necessary to establish to provide that sort of broad-based, effective, ongoing support that is meaningful to departments and that helps departmental officials and staff see that there is a place they can go for guidance. It's a place they can also go to provide concerns if they have seen something that is troubling to them. Bottom line, this is something that we've identified as having 4 training specialists and some funding for software, materials, and supplies. We believe this continues to be an essential priority for the Ethics Commission being actually able to accomplish the work that the voters set us up to do back in the 1990s.
I'm going to interrupt you for a minute because I'd like to, before we move to the priorities and what we think we need, I want to make sure that we've finished our discussion about what you have to submit in order to at least nominally comply with the mayor's budget instructions, because you've laid out a lot of information and alternatives, and I'm assuming you want commission guidance on that. I mean, that is ultimately what we're going to be voting on on the 12th, is which of the various scenarios or mixture of them you actually sacrifice up. So I want to make sure we get our questions answered. And one of the things I want to ask you about on the salary savings and attrition, we've had some significant portion of our staff serving as DSW workers for the past year now. Are those salaries being paid out of the Ethics Commission general fund budget, or are they being paid from other sources and that reflects part of your salary savings?
No, those are still considered full-time employees at the Ethics Commission. So we are continuing to pay the salaries of those employees who've been serving in a DSW capacity. And so that employees who served last year, who served extended through December 31st, we have 2 employees who were requested to be extended again. One extended through today, one extended through March. And so we have continued to, those are not reflected in salary savings. Those are salaries on the books, ostensibly still doing Ethics Commission work, but they're doing it through the Ethics Commission for DSW services specifically.
Okay. I think it's, I mean, not that the mayor doesn't know that that's how she's funding the COVID response, but for our purposes, I think that that's important. Just maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is that there are sources of state and maybe federal funds to reimburse cities for some of their cost of carrying out some of the DSW functions, so that if the city is seeking reimbursement, are they seeking reimbursement for the cost of those DSW workers as well? And does that come back to us?
I don't know the answer to that question. It's a very good question, and I'm happy to follow up with the mayor's folks to find out how those reimbursements from the state or federal government might work as to individual department budgets.
Mm-hmm. So the okay, and the positions that have been diverted to DSW of the A through D categories that you, or A through C categories that you've identified, what positions are those individuals in? Administrative support, engagement and compliance, IT, et cetera?
We have one of the positions, well, they've essentially been across all program areas initially. Our extended DSW work through the end of the calendar year and continuing as of today is one staff position in the audit division and one position in the enforcement division, investigating position. So those two areas, those are the two areas that are continuing as of today with DSW commitments. You will note, to your question about, or your point about sort of the relative prioritization of different types of work, it will be very helpful and welcoming to sort of get the public's feedback and the commission's feedback, certainly, and direction about where relatively you would place priority, or you wish those priorities to be placed going forward. Operationally, you do not see a proposal that would reduce our investigative capacity. In fact, the next section of this brief slides was to talk about the request for increased investigative resources that we believe we need, because investigative work at this time, with what we know is still facing the city and the corruption concerns that continue to exist, although not identified specifically in the mayor's budget priority list in her instructions to departments this year. We believe that that is still a critical area that is essential for our office to be participating in. And at this stage, our proposal and the approaches that we're looking at does not include a reduction for our investigative work, because at the bottom, at the end of the day, we would still be enforcing the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. We can get to that. One other question. How much are you charged for your rent on an annual basis, and subject to all of the staff's extended family not being pleased with my suggestion? But what about the idea of giving up your office and just going online for fiscal 22? I mean, out of, desperation, as it were, because none of the reductions are tolerable. I mean, it really is down to, we're going to just have to organize revenue raising and bake sales and whatnot. But first off, do they give you the option of not paying rent?
Not at this point. That is something that we raised internally and looked at. Can we acknowledge that we haven't been paying rent for this past year? We haven't been occupying the space for which we've been paying rent to the city. We reside in a city-owned building. So essentially we are paying ourselves as a city entity for the space that we're using. But it is roughly, I believe, somewhere in the ballpark of $100,000 to $120,000 a year. And Stephen Massey can please jump in if I've completely butchered that number, but I believe it's in the ballpark of $100,000 plus to $120,000 or so, at least, that we pay in rent each year. So one answer is absolutely, we had put that on the list of items to continue in discussion with the mayor's office about, to see what they are doing, if perhaps the city could rent out that space for others who might be able to use it. So the short answer is we don't know whether that's possible. The longer answer is it's probably not something that the budget folks would think is a benefit, because it's something that they're still on the hook for anyway, so unless they can rent the building out. But I think that's a really fair question, and one we've internally discussed how to raise that question and go forward as well. It seems like it's time to be as nimble as possible.
Okay, so then my final question is, if the salary attrition doesn't reflect positions that are being used for other city purposes, what is that? So you've got an attrition savings target of $237,000, which is probably about 2 full positions. Are these positions that are vacant that you're advertising for now that you're not going to fill? Are they positions that you have nominally but you don't have a requisition for? I'm not sure I understand how you meet that number.
Yes, in a normal year, maybe it's just to provide context. In a normal year, if we say had all positions filled, an attrition savings target might be something that would say we anticipate somebody going off to school, and so we'll have 3 months of salary savings at the end when they decide to go back to school in March. So 3 months out of a fiscal year, we may have 3 months of salary savings. That would be potentially something that would be an attrition savings during a normal year. In other years, in this year that we're currently in, for example, part of the way we attempted to address an attrition savings issue was the delay of hiring, right? You could delay the hiring for 6 months. Well, this is not a good year. This is, but in a year where you have some hiring decisions to make, you could delay the hiring by 4, 5, 6 months to try and make that up. I think what's notable here for us is that the scope of these cuts in total are going to have to require a decision about what essentially are we prioritizing work-wise in the office, because whether it's attrition savings, the contingency cuts, they don't necessarily have a one-to-one relationship with the bucket of the cut. There's a total reduction proposed that we have to come up with a variety of ways to reach. So if we were, for example, to say we're simply not going to continue to hire the 5 positions that we are about to start interviewing, that we have closed applications for at this point, that could in theory be some salary savings. In total, that still would not make up the proposed cuts that we're expected to achieve in the coming year. And importantly, it also doesn't address what are we going to endeavor to achieve as an organization with the mandate that we have. So I think there are a number of ways that one can look at the budget trade-offs. Our approaches that are outlined for discussion purposes today focus on what those trade-offs would be programmatically if we had to pull back on any positions in that area. Because even with the positions that we are hiring for, we still know that they're essential to achieve the minimum changes that are in play now. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but there's not a direct one-to-one relationship about which position goes into an attrition savings cut. These approaches are really to try to say, showing a relative balancing and a sort of a relative way to weigh the various types of work that we're doing. Does that answer your question, or
Yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is that you're going to have to make decisions over the course of the year. If you put that number in, if you're required to put that number in, you're going to have to, unless somebody comes to you and says that they've decided to take 6 months leave of absence, you're going to have to achieve that through hiring delays. That's what I think I'm hearing, right? That's
again in a normal way. That's a normal way that people tend to look at the attrition savings targets. I don't think that in my time here we've ever been in a normal situation, sadly.
Great. Okay. Well, then, not to delay are there, Commissioner Bush, I see your hand up if you wanted to go ahead and ask your questions now.
I just would seek 2 clarifications. When you refer to the charter mandate, are you encompassing the mandates that were given to the commission by the voters separate from the charter? For example, the requirement of an annual audit of a lobbyist. That's not in the charter, but that's a vote of the people.
That's right. That is not. This is an example of what the charter has set forth. But as you've seen, and maybe I could have made that more clear in the lobbying. If we were to cut the auditing staff, the lobbying program that is also mandated by the law would not be part of that. That would be impacted. So the short answer, the charter provision speaks to what is in the charter section, the charter appendix that identifies charter duties and responsibilities of the commission. There are many more in the ordinances, as you've noted.
For example, it was by ordinance that we now require disclosures and filings by permit consultants, which, as you know, has been an area of controversy and legal action. But that's not in the charter. That was something that was passed separately by the voters. So that's not incorporated among the duties that are core duties as outlined in these documents. Is that correct?
They're not identified as charter duties. I think your point is well taken that the expansion and the term what are mandated duties would be a fuller list than the one that exists there if they were talking about what is voter mandated. So we can amend that and make that clear in any documents going forward about the reach of things in the ordinances that may not be charter identified, but are in the ordinances that are voter mandated, to make that list as full and accurate as possible.
The other question I have is that when we're talking about cuts, we're talking about based on general funds support for the commission. Is that correct? So you're not including non-general fund revenue, for example, fines and fees.
No, these figures do include those because they are part of what make up our revenue. We assess fees and fines, and they go into the general fund, and then through the budget process, that general fund bucket allocates funding back to the Ethics Commission. So, but they are general funds. If I'm understanding your question, that is general fund money, and so that would be reflected in what we estimate annually to be our revenue and what the city would therefore expect to receive from us based on those estimates.
But the commission could make a request and perhaps succeed at getting work orders from non-general fund departments, like the airport. Is that correct?
Yes, and the issue of work orders, again, is not included in this discussion about sort of the approaches that we might take to other revenue options that we haven't yet established. Those aren't addressed in this because that, you know, our focus was on trying to provide some overview of programmatic output and outcomes. Obviously, the two are interrelated and could be impacted by that, but this discussion today, this memo does not frame those issues up. And that is something that we're, you know, again, we're trying to get as much information on mechanically how that would work, how that might be set up, what would be the potential timeline for actually implementing that were it possible. So that's information that we're hoping to bring back at the next meeting, obviously in discussion with further information on the impact that we might actually be facing.
Thank you. I'll circle back to other points, but I would just note now so that people have it in their mind that in the past we have received the value of services to make up for the lack of support from our own budget. For example, the Brennan Center did an extensive amount of research on options for tightening up our reporting systems. MapLight did extensive research on the actual facts of what's being disclosed and how it impacts policies. So there are options in the past that have worked for us in extending our reach. When we come to that part, I will be proposing to extend that effort again.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other commissioners who have questions now? And if not, I'm going to allow Director Pelham to proceed with the rosier scenario, which is what we think we need to do what we need to do. So I don't see any other hands up. Commissioner Bush, were you finished for now? Go ahead, you're mute.
Thank you. That was my questions.
Okay. All right. So Director Pelham, if you would like to outline the slide here on departmental priorities. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. So just the last two slides to set the stage for, again, eliciting comment, feedback, input from the public as we go forward with this budget discussion starting in earnest today and through next month, and in fact, over the next 6 months, likely. We, again, are framing up and identifying as the Board of Supervisors' own budget and analyst indicated and recommended in our performance audit that they issued last August, that proactive outreach on the city's ethics laws is really essential to support those who are in the city's trenches, making decisions and taking actions every day, and also to reduce the overall need for enforcement action in the first place. So that again, we're proposing the ethics at work. The Ethics Commission, to my knowledge, in its 25 plus year history, has never had a dedicated training unit. There have been positions that have been identified for that periodically, but there has never been a focused training effort established as a priority operationally. And I think that that is something that we have to acknowledge has an impact on the kinds of things that the BLA audit identified. So our focus, again, will be to describe in detail how we would go about this, why 4 training specialists would be essential to supporting that work and to performing that work, and the training software, materials, and supply that would be the adjunct to those positions being able to do their work. We will continue to make those efforts as we can. And we know there are other city departments that do it as well. We work in partnership with the city attorney's office to do, for example, live briefings for the Municipal Executives Association. City Attorney Shen, Deputy City Attorney Shen and I are coordinating with MEA to do one for city managers in early March as part of the bargaining agreement that the city reached with MEA a year or so ago. But those are one-offs, and those are things that are not something that we as a city, I think, are sustaining in the way that we need to. We talked about onboarding, we talked about levels of support for new supervisors, managers, and I think this isn't the point for me to make the case for why I think this is essential, but we will take the opportunity to try and make that case in the most detailed way possible about how this kind of work differs from the more passively received request for one-off training. So this, in our view, is critical to establishing tone at the top, both with people who step into roles and people who are coming through the ranks. We have to be able to invest in the city's workforce because there are tremendously talented people who we want to be here for the long haul. And this is one way to support them in that work. The last piece that I'll just touch on and then turn it back to you, Chair Ambrose, is the investigative work. Again, looking back at, again, what the Board of Supervisors budget and legislative analysts stated in their audit report of us is that we know that the length of time it takes to close investigations, it certainly detracts from our mission to be able to provide confidence to the public that we are doing the work that we need to be doing to provide for accountability within our parameters and the role that we've been given. But it does speak more largely to the impact on the city. We need to be doing, and we are doing, steps and processes and plans and work as we speak to improve not just how we do investigations, but how we prioritize them, the resources we can allocate to them. And we know that even with those improvements, that is not going to be enough. So we have identified that the staffing levels that we need to do this, the status quo is not sufficient. We have looked at here a proposal to increase our enforcement staff by 3 additional investigators, 3 additional enforcement staff, in addition to the 4 investigators the 4 investigative positions we currently have, so that we can reduce the length of time to resolve investigations, but importantly also to increase our capacity to be handling the kinds of complex cases that come forward to us. This also would have some traditional professional services funds that would enable us to have a pretty straightforward online case management system so that the administrative support work, you might think of it as a paralegal type work in some organizations, administrative support work elsewhere. We need the resources to be able to organize and maintain that work and do that work in a way that is the most efficient possible. And we don't currently have that in place. We will need to. So that also speaks to some additional funding for that. So these are the 2 areas that assertive ethics and outreach, ethics at work outreach program, a more robust enforcement division to raise our capacity in the organization to do both of those types of work is something that, where I sit, continue to be significant priorities for us. And so that's what we wanted to put on this slide presentation to provide that as a starting point for the Commission's discussion and, as I said, for public input. So this was the last of the slides, just inviting that input, and we appreciate the time that folks have spent looking at the information, communicating with us at this point. And again, we know and we hope that this is just the start of that conversation, that we would very much welcome further input about in reaction to some of these ideas, other ideas that haven't been discussed. And with that, I'll just take down the slides, and hopefully that will provide some input for you as a commission to be able to give us your feedback as well in this meeting today.
Okay. I want to just take a minute to note the comments that we received from Messer Marks, provided in writing. I don't know if she has the ability to call in, and on the chance that she doesn't, and assumed that we would all share her remarks, I just wanted to note that she is endorsing and recommending both the support for the priority that you identified on ethics at work to build training staff and software materials that would make it easier to promote an understanding of employees' ethical responsibilities. She also recommended increases in the investigative and enforcement staff in order to reduce to 9 months most investigative matters, and to investigate and resolve more complex matters within 18 months. And she, as I'm sure you will, pointed to the budget and legislative analyst recommendations as also affirming the necessity for additional resources in order to meet that investigative mandate. So I just want to thank Ms. Marks for taking the time to submit these comments, and we certainly share the concerns that she raises about the Ethics Commission being underfunded. I do want to, I don't think there's any question that I support the funding objectives that you've identified. What I'm struggling with is whether or not there's any realistic chance of getting the kind of full funding that we desire in a budget year that is tremendously terrible, when we weren't able to get this kind of support when we were flush. And yes, certainly the added negative spotlight of the corruption scandal may put the mayor's budget process on high alert, so that they recognize that the shortcomings in the past, may have helped us to avert some of these problems. Although I'm not sure that that's the case, we might have been able to uncover them faster. One of the things I'm thinking, though, having watched the budget process from the point of view of a city employee who did work furloughs and foregone raises promised and gave up comp time and so on, I know full well that the general fund is not the best place to be if you're looking to have your agendas funded. So continuing to look at departments for work orders on the Form 700 position is something that, presumably we can pursue. But one of the things that I've been thinking about, when you have costs of some activity, there's always a problem of how those costs are borne, sort of the externalities of those activities, and whether or not the people who are benefiting from funding those activities and increasing somebody else's costs are actually paying those costs, which is what we're talking about having enterprise departments who have sources of revenue other than the general fund, paying through work orders for the work that we will have to do to help their enterprise department employees comply. The other universe, though, is the contracting community in San Francisco. Those people who are, for the most part, using either federal dollars in our extensive social health enterprises that we fund to provide health services to people, or state dollars, or bond funds, which is a whole nother source beyond general fund sources, and that contracting, including the consulting community, are frankly, when you look at the controller's report and the indictments, are the main beneficiaries of the corruption scandal, and the people who I think are the beneficiaries of the least amount of ethical training. Of course, when they sign their contracts, they agree that they've read all of the chapters of the administrative code requiring them to not have a conflict of interest and not make campaign donations and, not buy virgin redwood, et cetera. But whether or not they actually even read the boilerplate, let alone internalize it and have their employees understand it and commit to it, is a completely different thing. So it occurs to me that maybe one revenue source that would be actually fairly easy to implement if we could get the Board of Supervisors and the mayor to agree with us is to include a fee in the city contracts so that the contractors have to pay us to provide some kind of, ethics at work training resource for those consultant and contractor employees, because frankly, I don't know how many people realize it, but many of our big billion-dollar bond projects, the people who are actually working on those projects, doing the exact same work as a DPW engineer or a PUC civil engineer, are people who work for AECOM and Parsons and Mr. Atalia as construction managers, et cetera. Those people they sign something that says, yeah, I know all these rules, but they're not in the same category of having to certify that they read the good government code or, what have you. Anyway, it's just a thought, because if we don't reach out to either the permit expediters, the lobbyists, the private sector to get funding, or the capital funds, which are completely, different source, not different in the sense that it's all coming out of the people of the city and county of San Francisco ultimately, then I don't have high hopes for getting these additional funds that we need to do the work that we're required to do. At best, I think we'll be fortunate if we can stop the bloodletting that is evident from the $734,000 required proposed budget. So anyway, those are my thoughts for the moment, and I'm going to turn to any other commissioners who want to comment. I think I see Commissioner Lee looking for her hand. Is that true? Can I recognize you then without, you could just do that if,
Okay.
now that we've learned how the system works.
Well,
Oh, I'm
thank
sorry,
you.
Commissioner Chu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, first of all, I want to commend the director for putting together this really realistic but painful proposed budget. I want to know if the director can give us a refresher course on the budget process, like after the mayor submits it, what's going to happen at the board level, who can add, who can subtract to the commission's budget. I also want to echo what the chair has said. I think the recent, attention to corruption has really exposed that in these difficult times, more than ever, we need the Ethics Commission to really, really help instill public confidence. The only way to do that is through public education, make sure that people just don't glance over the boilerplate, really pay attention to what these requirements and these budgets, these contracts require you to do. And more importantly, the investigation part, to really make sure that we are on top of all these mandates that we are required to do. And I think that there's a certain, I understand the city is going through a really trying budgetary times, but especially during this COVID time, the city is trying to find resources to support our business, support our nonprofits, support our city. And that would also give the potential of those who may not know the process to be left out of the process or to be drawn in to, maybe, maybe there will be other expediters who would come out and say, hey, I can get you a COVID contract. So, whenever there are good, well-meaning programs to support our community, there are always a few opportunistic peddlers. And I think that, we need to be mindful that, the recent corruption scandal only exposed that there are opportunists out there. And the more reasons that the Ethics Commission really need to step up. And I know that the budget is tight, but this is not the time for us to look at, reducing our investigative reach. And with this COVID funding coming in, through federal, state, and local, we need to be more mindful to really make sure people know what they are, what is required of them, and to make sure that those who are really in need can really get the proper support that they deserve, and not and they don't need to jump through the unsavory hoops to get that. I don't know how we can do it. Maybe through the public hearing process, but maybe through an op-ed to really lay out why this is the time we cannot think about cutting back on, good government oversight and monitoring, but instead to really expand on it.
Okay. I'm actually going to recognize Commissioner Chu, because I saw you had your hand up before and I didn't see it.
Oh, thank you, Chair Ambrose. I wanted to echo Commissioner Lee's comments and observe that and emphasize that I think that the public opinion, I think, can help shape government action. And I think that the stories of the ongoing and increasing arrests and tales of public corruption are disturbing to many residents of San Francisco, and that they not only expect but absolutely deserve better from our elected and appointed officials. And so the critical importance of investing now when we are in the midst of a global pandemic and a severe budget shortage, cannot be more important. It's when the going gets tough, I think, is when character and things that are is when what we value is put to the test. Because when cash is flush, the budgets are good, it's really easy to go along, but it's only when we have to prioritize and make really difficult decisions. And I speak not about just the decisions facing the Ethics Commission, in submitting a budget that can comply with the $733,000 reductions that the mayor has requested. But who are we in San Francisco? How do we feel about corruption? Is it okay for us to allow the behavior to continue? Because if we do nothing, if we don't fund this Ethics at Work program, if we don't engage with leaders and start to change the tone at the top, the message that we send collectively, city government, is that it's okay. That it's fine because it happened, and well, that's really bad, and it makes us look terrible that the federal government is coming and investigating and arresting and charging people left and right, and it's spilling out across multiple departments. But if we don't do anything, what that says is that it's okay to continue, unless we take action to hold them accountable and to take steps to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I think that our message, in addition to the budget submission, where we propose ethics at work and propose this investment, it does need to get out to the public. And I think that we need to, as Commissioner Bush rightly pointed out in his comments that were circulated yesterday, is that supporting small business and economic recovery is only going to be aided by the work that the Ethics Commission does, because government contracting, the first victims of rigged government contracting are small businesses because they're excluded from participation. And if the message is that corruption and public contracting is okay, we're just going to allow it to continue as usual, then the Board of Supervisors and the mayor should not invest in ethics at work because they don't want ethics at work, I think is the message. And I think an op-ed outlining why we think this is so important and the impact of taking action and not taking action in this arena, I think is really critical in order to help shape the dialogue around this. Because in the absence of that, it just becomes about numbers. Like, well, it's really terrible. We have this huge, $650+ million budget shortfall, and that's real. And I'm not dismissing that's very real. But there are consequences, beyond simply the budget numbers that the leaders have to take into account. And one question is, and so this is, I think, the test for the current administration is how important is a clean and transparent and government without corruption? How important is it? How much are you going to invest? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, I think, pay lip service to it, but really the test of that commitment is what resources and funding that you put into it and what action that you actually take. And so if the budget that we have to submit is gutted by $730,000, to me, what that says is this city is not serious about cleaning up the big mess of corruption that is festering and metastasizing in City Hall.
Okay, Commissioner Lee, since your hand is up, I'm assuming you want to respond to something Commissioner Chu said, and then I need to go to Commissioner Bush.
Oh, sorry. I just want to ask a procedural question. Yes, we have to submit a budget under the requirement. Can we, as a commission, send out a public statement, op-ed, whatever vehicle we can use to really raise the points that Commissioner Chu has mentioned, so that people don't look at it, because the general public will look at the budget and say, okay, here's the budget, you're going to get this. But people need to understand the background, why we are doing this in protest, to explain going forward. These are the things that the city needs to take a hard look and take responsibility for. So just a procedural question. Can we as a commission, not as individuals, does the commission issue public statements via op-ed, television interviews, newspaper interviews, whatever it is, to get our message across?
Yes. I mean, I'm going to ask for Andrew Shen if he had anything to comment, but we can, and I mean, we've been talking about what sort of op-ed or editorial or public statement do we make for a few meetings now, and I agree with the consensus here, which is I think this is the time for the commission. I think that the point that you made, Commissioner Lee, that we would articulate that we are submitting the required budget reduction under protest is a good way to frame it. I also think the point that Commissioner Chu made that that it's when we're in the trenches like this that our true values are disclosed, because when you have to prioritize in times of shortage, it becomes clear what you really care about. And we want to emphasize to the city that we need to be one of the enumerated priorities of the mayor with respect to the budget. And Andrew, are there any notes that you have about making a editorial, or actually, could you clarify? I'm pretty sure that there's no charter requirement that the Ethics Commission approve the budget that's submitted to the mayor, but I could be wrong about that. Do you happen to know?
So just on the media question first. So I agree with you, Chair Ambrose. Yes, the Ethics Commission can write an op-ed or otherwise speak to the media about its position about the budget submission. Just to keep in mind that, obviously we're under some time pressure with the budget process here. To speed it up, the commission could conceivably delegate the drafting of that or other media outreach efforts to particular members of the commission. So the entire op-ed or whatnot does not need to come back to the commission at a full commission meeting. So you could have one or two people to follow up on the front. The bylaws do as a default designate the chair as kind of the initial media spokesperson. But if the commission wants to switch it up for this particular assignment, that's fine too.
Yeah, I'm actually thinking that given the timeline, we would need to do this at the meeting on the 12th. So I might nominate myself and Commissioner Bush per either his or Esther Mark's suggestion to at least come up with an outline of the points that we want to be making, and we can talk about them then more explicitly on the 12th and get commission authorization with the benefit of their editorial suggestions. So that's kind of where I'm going with that. But just as a point of law, is it required that the Ethics Commission approve their budget? So they are one of those commissions that do have that. Okay, so because I think it came up last year that we didn't actually vote on the budget. I can't recall because I had missed the meeting in January, but we are required to vote on the submittal to the mayor's office or to what goes to the board.
Yeah, so in terms of, it does go, as you know, Chair Ambrose, the first part of the budget process is it does go to the mayor, and then eventually, as you know, will be transmitted to the board, where the board can make further cuts or adds as it sees fit. In terms of the commission's approval, I know as a matter of, there has been a little bit of inconsistency perhaps about the commission's explicit approval of the department's budget, but I think that's always been the best practice for the commission to explicitly approve the budget. But the recent budget ordinance that Leanne mentioned at the outset, which sort of set these new meeting requirements, is even more explicit that the commission does need to approve the budget.
Okay, and we have to approve the budget that gets submitted to the mayor, or the budget that the board ultimately adopts? Presumably the former.
Yeah, I'll defer to Director Pelham if she has more specific instructions here. But my understanding is that we would approve before it goes to the mayor, because that would be the budget's first stop.
If I might respond,
sure. Please.
I think in the past, the commission, in the past several years, the commission has generally adopted a framework for the budget, but because of the timing of the budget and the timing of commission meetings, the commission hasn't always adopted a specific document that says this is what is going into the mayor's budget proposal, into the mayor's system. So, for example, the process this year is the commission's next meeting is February the 12th, and which would be a public hearing, you know, on a proposed budget. The budget is not due. I think February 22nd or 23rd is when it's due to the mayor's office. So we have some significant time constraints. If the commission were to adopt what is actually being submitted, then that would probably require the commission in practice to have a commission meeting again on February 20th, the Friday before that submission, because in practice, I will tell you, with no administrative staff, but your technology director, your executive director, and the deputy director, who will be back at that point, we are always at the very last minute trying to finalize the information that we have to submit that document. So just for a bit of the sort of practicalities and logistics that in the past have been an issue for us, that's something that we might need to consider as well. I think our thought was that we would be bringing as much as we have as a proposed set of recommendations to that February 12th meeting. But at least if in the past we would likely not be in a position to have by February 9th, which would be the date we'd have to post that material. February 9th is the date by which we would have to have a full, complete budget proposal for you, which would be essentially 2.5 weeks before the date it's actually due. Those are some of the considerations at our end that we would want to be working with you on if you wanted to have the budget document finalized by February 9th.
No, I don't think any of us are saying that. But what I would like to know, because Andrew Shen, you had referenced the ordinance that was adopted last year that is the occasion for this meeting that we're having today, the 15 days before requirement. So can you tell us what the language is? I'm assuming it allows us to take an action on something that contains the essence of the budget, but delegate to the executive director to finalize the various fine points. Is that, can you read the language or give us a clue here?
I'll try to sort of quickly excerpt the language from the ordinance. So this is an ordinance, as mentioned, that was passed just very recently. It says, let me see. It doesn't speak to, I think, the level of detail that Leanne was speaking to, but it does say, for example, by no later than February 14 each year, there shall be a public meeting as specified in these subsections concerning each agency's proposed budget. The proposed budget the agency presents at this meeting shall provide the following information, ... The purpose of this meeting shall be to allow for public input into the agency's budget for the upcoming fiscal year. It's kind of skipping ahead a little bit here. For agencies subject to the oversight of a commission under the charter of the municipal code, such as the Ethics Commission, the commission may satisfy this subsection at a regular special meeting at which it considers final approval of the agency's proposed budget. And that was the language that I keyed in on, and sort of assuming, of course, that the commission does actually need to approve the budget. The ordinance does seem to especially contemplate that. I will defer to Director Pelham, of course, that my understanding, and I will confess to not knowing a lot of the details about this, is in terms of the actual information that's submitted to the Mayor's Budget Office. I believe it is technical in some nature. There's various line items that need to be spelled out in sort of painstaking detail. I'm not saying necessarily the commission needs to weigh in on that level of detail of what's submitted to the Mayor's Budget Office, but certainly along the lines of the budget framework. I think as Lane described, it's sufficient.
And just to add, if I might, Chair Ambrose, just make a note, additional note on this. The language from the ordinance reads that, as Andrew said, each agency must hold a public meeting concerning the department's proposed budget to allow for public input prior to the agency's submission of the proposed budget. The specific items that need to be required at that time are information about agency divisions, budget totals, major changes, including new or reduced initiatives and staffing changes, changes in service levels, projected salaries, savings, and how the agency is meeting budget instruction targets. So that language specifically comes from the public participation ordinance and is something we would fully plan to have at the next, at that February 12th meeting. So as Andrew indicated, there's a lot more detail in terms of the row, the line item that are submitted into the mayor's budget system. But certainly the information that I just read to you is information that we would plan to have at that meeting on February 12th, which would be a public meeting and possible action, of course, by the commission concerning the department's proposed budget. That's the language from the ordinance.
And I just also want to confirm Leanne's statement about that sort of time crunch that we're under. So I believe that this year's deadline for the final submission would be February 22nd. Under the ordinance, it's the 21st, but the 21st falls on a Sunday, so it kicks over to the 22nd.
Thank you.
So in the meeting, the no later than February 14th public meeting, would you characterize the meeting that we're having today as being that meeting, or do we have to have the meeting on the 12th with respect to the proposed budget? Because I'm just wondering, I mean, if, just for sake of discussion, does it help at all if we have, instead of the meeting on the 12th, if we have a meeting closer to the actual final submission? So going back, is today the meeting do we today meet the requirements of the no later than February 14th, or is this the 15 days before the 14th meeting that we're required to have?
Yeah, so we're required to have 2 meetings on the budget now, and so this is the one that needs to happen at least 15 days in advance of the final meeting. And then again, I completely understand Director Pelham's point that, even after the commission makes its final decision on the proposed budget framework, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done in the background about getting those, very precise line rows and items sort of spelled out. Because my general understanding is that final submission is pretty technical and does take some time to prepare. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if we want to put too much pressure on staff to get all that information together.
Okay, and then just to be clear, since February 14th is a Sunday, I'm assuming that we would interpret that as being satisfied if there was a meeting on February 15th. So just for you, Commissioner or Director Pelham, to consider if there's any advantage to moving our meeting from the 12th to the 15th, given what you have to accomplish by, because it's not for you, it's the 9th because the meeting's on the 12th. If there's any advantage, I'd certainly be willing to consider that. We don't have to decide that now over the course of the remaining course of the meeting. If commissioners, if you could just look at your calendars and see if there is any advantage to pushing our final meeting, still meeting the requirements of the ordinance, but giving the staff a chance to have more of the final proposed budget before us, just let us know. Director Pelham?
I would just want to offer that I think the time frame, moving it back by that time frame would mean that we would still have to post the information publicly by the February the 10th. So I think, I'm not sure that pushing it back provides a meaningful distinction for your staff's ability to pull this work off, given that we're also in the midst of likely interviews for 5 hirings that are underway. So it's difficult context, and I wish I could say we would be able to do this. I just want to give you a reality sense from what we're anticipating the workload to be at that time, that we will be strapped to be accomplishing all of this.
Why would it have to be the 10th if it's 72 hours, or is there additional time? I mean, if the meeting's on the 15th, I'm assuming you could post the agenda on Friday the 12th and still.
We certainly could comply with Bryan Act requirements. I think given that it's a public hearing, our hope and our practice has been trying to push those deadlines out a bit in advance of the meeting so that the public has ample time to review and access.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, I'm only suggesting this is if it's helpful for you, because it does presuppose that you're going to have a lot of a pretty solid framework by the, well, I mean, I guess not really by the 9th, by the 12th. I mean, because whatever we act on finally on the meeting on the 12th, if there are refinements from when you publish it to when we act on it, that would actually be appropriate. So, okay, I'm going to leave that subject. I just thank you, Mr. Shen, for filling us in on the new laws in this regard. And maybe we should get back to the substance of how we're going to manage this challenge. And I know I had Commissioner Bush, and then I'll go back around if anybody else has any further specific comments. Go ahead, Commissioner Bush.
Thank you. I want to echo your point about some of the revenue sources that come from the bonds. I served for 4 years on the Bond Oversight Committee, and every year we had more funds available than we spent. Usually about $2 million a year was sent back to the general fund. That's because bonds have a certain percentage that's required to be given to the controller's office for monitoring and oversight. How that is interpreted is a more open question. And so I want to know, Director Pelham, have you had discussions with Ben about using any of that funds to meet audit or other obligations that overlap with ethics?
We have not to date. I've reached out to the controller's office, and we haven't yet been able to coordinate a time to connect on all things budget related. So I will renew that request and ask that question to mix.
I think that he's open to a collegial relationship in terms of funding sources that they have and needs that we have. I noticed that in the mayor's directions on the budget, that one of the statements was that the proposal should include, quote, new revenue sources. And I don't see anything in the proposals that we've seen today that include new revenue sources. Is there a reason why that's not included?
I did not read that to be a must include new revenue sources, but to be a possibility that if departments have them to offer up, they will take them. So that is something I agree with you. I think we should be looking at that. I think conversations with the controller's office along the lines of what you've just described could be very productive and useful. So we'll renew that request and see what might be what we can learn and possibly pursue from that angle. And you know, again, if we're able to put something together that could be implemented and in effect sooner rather than later, we would be interested in pursuing it. Some of this we need to figure out is how long it might take to set something like that up and have it make an impact. But I don't have that information yet, but we'll commit to making sure we get some back to you.
I think work orders is another potential source, especially when it comes to Form 700s. And I note that the Public Utilities Commission is one of the places where there is non-general fund revenues, and that one of the commissioners over there now is Ed Harrington, who was the former controller of the city and who's well-versed in arrangements of work orders to assist general fund departments from non-general fund revenue, other departments. So that would be one place to start. In the material that I've provided, I think the total of non-revenue fund departments, employees who file 700s, was about 1,000, which is a long ways towards meeting the obligation. And I see that the budget analyst's proposal on that was that we carve out first those departments that are more likely to be of significance. And that would include the departments that have had problems like DPW and PUC. So I recommend that we start with an approach that deals with that. Also, it calls for us to explain demonstrated outcomes in our budget proposals. And I do not see ethics at work as showing a demonstrated outcome. And I say that because we have already got Form 700s that are filed by people. We have departments that do statements of incompatible activities. We have the city attorney's office with their annual release of Guide to Good Government. That's like a 3-tier process of providing information to city officials about what it is that they should be doing. Despite that, the people who have been charged criminally all were filing 700s. None of them were ever audited. None of them were ever charged by ethics. As far as I can see, we have never charged anybody on Form 700 with anything other than a late file, but not for failing to disclose appropriate information, including whether or not they took trips. They're simply not there. So I don't know if providing a couple $100,000 more in staffing is going to provide some demonstrated outcome as compared to hiring investigators and enforcement. Because as a past district attorney told me, nothing educates the public faster than an enforcement action. And I think that enforcement actions for people who have violated their trust and particularly violated the requirements for ethics as shown in the documents that they signed is a good starting point. And it would mean more than hiring and having tutorials for people. So I do not favor the funding for ethics at work under these circumstances, because I do not see any stated potential outcomes of reducing corruption or anything else. All I see is protective cover for people who are city officials who can claim that they took the classes. So I make that point to you for consideration as this goes on. Commissioner Chu mentioned the point that I had raised as well, which is the impact on small business. And I think that it would be good for whatever we submit to the mayor to spell out how corruption and rigged contracts is affecting income for small businesses in San Francisco. And some of that is spelled out in the controller's audit, where he took a look at the small business allocations from the PUC, and that they were rigged in a process that did not provide equal access to all small businesses, but were based on sort of a buddy system, for lack of a better term. That's not the term he used. So I've cited that in the material that I've provided. I think that that would be an important leg for us to stand on as we present this to the mayor and to the public. It's always a good idea when the mayor sets forward a series of elements that she wants to see included, that you then address those elements.
Can I interrupt you just for 1 second? I saw somewhere someone quote a statistics from a national whatever ethics organization that the analysis that 10 to 20% of public contract funds are misused. Was that something that you provided, Larry, or was it something that I read in a New York Times article about all those corrupt public officials that our former president just
pardoned?
I'm like, when I think about it, it makes me crazy, because it really is quite a rogues gallery of
some of them are California. That was something
right, exactly. So that was not you, because I want to find that statistic. I think that would feed into our it's not economical to cut ethics investigators.
It's the National Association of Inspector Generals, and I'll get you the specific citation.
Okay. All right.
Also, I can give you the data from the federal government themselves admitting that the PPP program actually did not go in the hands of the small businesses who really needed the money. So I can give you those numbers too.
I think all of that feeds into a picture of what it is that we value in our budget.
I want to get back to your comment about what exactly is ethics at work and how well, I think big picture, what we're all talking about is more resources to build ethical compliance and culture within our workforce. And among, I would add, among the contractors that the city does business with, whether that those resources are simply putting together training protocols. I don't think that that was the idea. I thought it was going to be much more hands-on and interactive with people in real circumstances. But I agree that if we're going to identify that as a potential solution to addressing tone at the top, we need to be more specific about the range of activities that those additional trained staff would engage in to promote ethical behavior. And frankly, I have some ideas about how you do that, how you change the culture, how you improve the protection from whistleblowers, how you expand. I mean, that's what I was talking about getting to the contracting community. If you can expand the universe of people who are capable of acting as whistleblowers because they see something and they know specifically that that's not okay, then you also help protect city employees who want to be whistleblowers but who are too afraid because they can't believe that they won't be retaliated against because they're the only ones inside the city who would have known about that particular bad behavior. I'm sure I can attest to the fact that that is clearly the motivation on a lot of the contracting staff. If they're the only ones that know, then they're afraid to tell. So anyway, there's a lot of things that hopefully that we can engage in. But
I just want to I want to point out that we have a lot of work to be done in order to understand what the ethic obligations are, because as it stands now, it's not at all clear. For example, who enforces statements of incompatible activities if somebody violates the lines that were drawn down? I've been talking about that with Director Pelham. It's not entirely clear whether that's something that falls under the director of the department. Does it go to HR? Does it go to ethics? I've never seen a single complaint that goes anywhere of a violation of statements of incompatible activities. So is this a meaningless exercise, or what does it do? And then you get into questions like, what do you have to disclose even on a Form 700? We now have a law in the city that says you have to disclose if you're in a regular contact with somebody who is has issues before your commission, even if it's in an unpaid position, so that if you're both on a nonprofit board of directors. Well, there's a law that says that it has to be disclosed. There's nothing that says where it's disclosed, and I don't know of anyone who can find out where it's disclosed. So when you start talking about what kind of training we're going to give, you have to start, first of all, with what is it that we're telling people they have to do? We don't know the information as well as we should, which is one of the reasons why I think we could look to a group like the Brennan Center or someone else to help us identify what it is that people need to disclose and be more transparent on in order to obtain ethical government. And I would put that ahead of hiring staff or anything else.
I don't know that those two things are mutually exclusive. And I don't want to. I'm not to keep talking because I've got Commissioner Chu. But first, Director Pelham, you have your hand up. So if there's something that you wanted to say at this moment, otherwise I'll go to Commissioner Chu for further comment.
Yeah. Yes. No. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I just wanted to make a couple of comments in response to Commissioner Bush's comments. First of all, to correct, if I may, with respect, we do in fact have authority to enforce, and we have enforced violations of statements of incompatible activities by departments. I think the point that he's underscoring is that there is, like so many things in our world, shared responsibility, which can sometimes be very confusing and leave people wondering whose responsibility it is to do what. So those kinds of things certainly do need to be clarified. And also, I think as to the Ethics at Work program, I would, 2 points. I would encourage the Commission to maybe refresh your memories, take a look at the information we provided last month in the Executive Director's report, specifically with regard to our training plan for FY21. That FY21 training plan that we developed in a response to the BLA audit recommendation identifies over a 3-year span various activities that we would engage in, resource considerations dependent. But FY23 would include reaching out to do training for contractors. So I think to the comments that you've made about the significance of the world of contractors, we absolutely do need to be moving in that arena and have identified how we would assess what is useful and meaningful and therefore most helpful to get those folks understanding the world of ethics compliance that they need to be aware of. So that is something that we're developing. And then I think thirdly, the piece about ethics at work, that also with respect to our partners who are doing existing work. And I think the question that Commissioner Bush is asking is actually, I would reframe it as perhaps our activities as a city have not been effective. Because if we're still seeing the results that we're seeing with the inputs that we're seeing, then maybe we need to change the inputs. And I think ethics at work is an effort to identify how we would better assess what the need is, how we would better meet that need on a regular basis so that we can actually make an impact. And I think just on that last point, the ethics at work package that we have identified spoke about how we would go about assessing that last year when we submitted it to the mayor's office. We will certainly detail that out more fully like we did with our ethics training plan for this fiscal year, because I think it is, as you all are recognizing, and Commissioner Bush's comments particularly were underscoring, this is about impact, not about outputs. So I just wanted to offer those perspectives because as you can tell, I think we do feel that there is a significant need for something different. And I think that's what we're proposing here.
Okay, I'm going to actually go to Commissioner Chu because your hand's been up for a while, and then I can go back to you, Commissioner Bush, if you had further comment.
Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I think that as I've been listening, my key takeaways from here are that the city right now is as our nation is in a crisis of multiple dimensions. And in the crisis, the Chinese word for crisis is wei ji. Wei means danger, ji means opportunity. So in the danger, there's opportunity. And I think that now is our opportunity as an ethics commission and as a city to meet this moment in history, right, of where we are. And I think that for us to be successful as an ethics commission in discharging our mandate and fulfilling our obligations to the people of San Francisco, I think we need to be bold in our vision and comprehensive in our solution and really clear about what it's going to take, what we're going to do, and what the impact it's going to have, and what the resources are required to be able to accomplish all those things. And so I think to Commissioner Bush's point, that I think enforcement, to paraphrase the DA, is like, yeah, that gets people's attention. But I don't think we should choose one over the other. I think we need to say we need to do all of these things, because if we only do part of it, we're only going to have partial success, and that's not what we should set our sights on. Because we have to create a culture through tone at the top, and we have to make sure that people know what is allowed, what is permitted, what's not permitted, what the consequences are for failing, and then we need to hold those accountable for those who violate their obligations. And so I think we need to hit on all of those cylinders and say that there are constraints, but if we are serious about having a clean government, then these are the things that we need to do.
Unmuted. Go ahead, Commissioner Bush, and then just so everybody's thinking, we need to get back to the base budget and the alternatives that Director Pelham laid out if we're going to provide any, if anyone has any specific preferences, so that she has the benefit of that while she's struggling to come up with what she's going to present to us on the 9th. So I just want to make sure everybody's thinking about that, to do her the favor of going through A, B, C, and D, and at least, highlighting how they strike you. So go ahead, Commissioner Bush.
I'd just like to point out in terms of enforcement that the board budget analyst reported that it takes between 2 and 3 years for an investigation to be completed by ethics. And they contrasted that with the FTPC, which takes about 6 months. And they also contrasted it with Los Angeles and others. So we are lagging considerably behind the pace of enforcement in other jurisdictions. That's number one. Number two is that San Francisco is not alone in facing these challenges. In Los Angeles, we have city council members who have been arrested for corruption in similar circumstances to San Francisco. Same thing is happening in Illinois, and in Ohio, and in New York. It is a national consequence, I believe, of a failure to have strong national policies when it comes to money and what it's paying for. And so it falls down to each local level where things can be pieced off. And so that's a reality where we can collaborate with some of the other jurisdictions about solutions that they're finding. And I would also like to put on record my belief that we have taxed our staff to the utmost. They work hard, they do good work, but we are asking of them to do a much more than can be done by human beings under these circumstances. And that's why I keep pushing for us to add additional resources, whether it's work orders or whether it's something from the controller's office, or whether we solicit grants to provide additional research. I also have been a strong proponent of creating advisory committees where we can have some people who take a deeper and broader look at what else is going on elsewhere and what we might do in San Francisco, because we cannot do it all in-house the way this is not an in-house legal arm in a corporate world. This is a public process. And I think that we need to provide better resources and a better commitment, but certainly the public has a right to expect action faster than 2 or 3 years for an investigation to take place. And I'd like to see a budget that proposes this essential staff needed to bring us down to about 6 months for an investigation, similar to other jurisdictions.
So that actually, though, taking us back to the specific proposals, I mean, first of all, we've been down one investigator for a year because of disaster service workers, even though that person's being paid for by the Ethics Commission, which is, I think, a point we need to call out in the budget. In the options, I don't see, I guess it would be the only approach D, where there would be broad cuts that would end up in any kind of implications for enforcement staff, although your base administrative support cuts would also affect them because they would then be responsible for their own sunshine ordinance document production or what have you, I assume, right?
We have currently, actually, the investigator who's been assigned DSW service has been our specialist on Sunshine Plus. So that certainly would, the administrative support cut that is identified here would speak to fines collection process, which is not something that the enforcement staff currently handles. We would have to reprocess that and automate in the appropriate area of our work. So so it doesn't have the direct impact in that sense on the investigations and enforcement activity that we're doing.
So then I haven't committed to mind your various approaches, but it looks to me like of all of your approaches, you've avoided hitting your enforcement investigative staff. Okay.
That was the intent.
So
through these alternatives that we've sketched out.
Right. And beyond that, the engagement and compliance impact, I gather, if I recall, you're saying that the position that we just struggled to obtain for the policy division and got advertised and listed is one that would be sacrificed under this scenario. Is that correct?
No, under approach B, as it's sketched out, the policy positions would not be impacted.
So which one was that? Because I could have
I'm
sworn I
sorry.
saw that.
Approach D, the broad cuts.
I see. Okay, so if you did suggest to them, I'm thinking strategically, if you did suggest to them that if you were going to meet their requirements, that you would eliminate the things that we were able to successfully achieve in the last round, then that would, meaning the new positions. So in order to meet your budget, you just take all the positions that you've just so carefully worked hard to advertise and interview some for anyway, and say you're not going to fund those. With the theory being that if we were able to win those positions last time, we'd be able to win them again. But I assume if you did that, that would screw up any recruitment and engagement with the individuals who are applying for those jobs, and would put us back in time on the, I know it's the Form 700, and there was another new position, right, that you got aside from the policy position?
Well, the position as a client support services position was one that was specifically dedicated just providing support for the rollout of the Form 700 project. And that's something that we will be contacting folks to interview probably within the next week. That window has closed. A policy position that we have also advertised that the window has closed, and we'll also be reaching out to interview in the next week or two, would also be impacted under this approach.
Under D? Yes,
under D. We would have a position that recently became vacant in our policy group that would not be filled. That would impact, our technology group, that would not be filled. We would also, the policy position would also not be filled. I think I just mentioned that. And Stephen, if you want to jump in, if I'm missing a position, I think I may be missing one here.
I'm just curious, because it's often one of the first things that happens in the trying to meet these annual budget reduction numbers is identifying positions that are not yet filled in the first round. And so I was trying to understand how that is reflected in your A through D scenarios.
I'll just make one comment, but I'll turn it to Stephen just to clarify, but or to add on anything. But I think one of the things that's the challenge here is each of the areas would have to be cut. And the reason we didn't identify specific positions because that may be, again, subject to some change. And the focus was more on what are we asking of that group to do. Under approach D, each unit of the office essentially would face cuts. Which positions those are would likely be positions that we are now filling. And I think part of what we're trying to identify is if we are facing these kinds of cuts, how will we best be situated with what is left standing in the way of staffing resources to accomplish the most of what we need to accomplish? And that's part of the challenge of what we were trying to identify is that we are trying to retain all resources possible to do the work that's necessary. But let me just pause there. Stephen, can you jump in and just clarify what positions those were identified under approach D to make the math work?
Thank you.
I'm trying to calculate this as everybody speaks, but it looks like if you specifically targeted just the new positions, let's see here, that would achieve the cut. It's not a scenario that we presented, but if you went that approach, you would not cut you would most likely not need to cut the administrative support. You would be cutting positions in IT, policy, enforcement, the audit management position, and in engagement and compliance. There's the position specifically for Form 700 e-filing support.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to know what those positions on the I think I'm assuming this puts you in a really difficult position with respect to the hiring, because if you think that you're almost going to have to act, right, as if these cuts could be realized, because how hard is it to turn around and pretend to offer somebody a job and then you're not going to be able to even get a requisition for them because it's not going to be in your budget for the following year. So how so if you're going to get delayed in the hiring for all these critical positions, I mean, how are you going to handle that? It's really what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Is there anything we can do to help?
Well, I think this is the way we are in fact handling it now is with all with candidates who have been applying and we're planning to reach out to invite for an interview. We want to be absolutely transparent about the budget scenario that we're facing. So we'll be providing linked information to them about the budget status, about these ongoing conversations, and about how we're thinking about it. But I also will remind them that as late as December, at the time the budget instructions were issued, the mayor's office continued to give us the green light for hiring these positions, and that is to me a signal that that there is some support for recognition that these are positions that are critical to accomplish the things that everybody has been talking about over the last 6 months that the Ethics Commission needs to be accomplishing. But that's certainly also conveying our commitment to be moving forward with every ounce of capacity that we have to fill these seats, because this is work that needs to be done. And these are resources we need to have on staff. Now, we move ahead with filling positions as we have planned to. That would, under the mayor's impact, have consequences for what else we might have to cut. And again, these are the trade-offs that this kind of a cut requires us to assess, is what kind of resources do we need to be investing in to get the work done that we need to. And so those will just be ongoing discussions Once the budget is submitted, of course, with all the documentation to Commissioner Lee's question earlier about the process, then it's an ongoing negotiation and discussion with the mayor's office to see if they in fact believe that the cuts they've identified for us are cuts that they believe should be imposed. Then after the mayor proposes the budget that she has later this spring, then the Board of Supervisors again has the opportunity to weigh in on whether they think the mayor's budget recommendations make sense. And they have in the past made adjustments, as they did last year, so that we were able to retain the investigator position that we needed to fill. So it, you know, it is a long, you all know that it is a very long process, and we won't have clean answers until the budget is actually signed. But I think as a strategy for people who are interested in working with us, we want to be as transparent as possible, but also as realistic and encouraging as possible, that we know as an organization, at least as I see it, we critically need these positions and these roles to be filled to do the work that we have started to do and that we would have to do even if we were facing a significant restructuring and reorganization because of budget cuts that may be imposed. And at this point, that's the best that I can tell you based on what I understand the situation to be and how I would hope that we could proceed through the budget process. So just wanted to provide that comment.
Right. So what I'd like to do is actually go around just to get the benefit of, you know, I'm not asking for a vote across the board or that we'd necessarily achieve consensus, but try and give the director some feedback about what your priorities are. To quote Commissioner Chu, I mean, this is where the rubber hits the road, and you have to at least express, you know, your preferences. And I would say in my case, I am strongly opposed to approach C. I don't want to back off of the e-filing of Form 700. I think that even more than additional training and support for staff, getting that raw, not just the disclosure out there, but the exercise that all of those filers will have in knowing that that information is going to be generally available to the public, I think is a really important spotlight on the requirements in filing your Form 700 and what you know the law is trying to achieve in terms of you know not accepting illegal gifts. So I would not be a fan at all of approach C. I actually think that after protecting that effort, I think that it's more important to protect enforcement where we are lagging than it is on the engagement and compliance, because as we know, we're not going to have an election until 2022. So that would be, I gather, I don't know if that's March of 2022, if there's a primary that year, but that's the, you know, hopefully we would get, I don't know, money from heaven to get us through the primary season and answering people's questions about compliance. So anyway, those are my, and beyond that, you know, broad-based cuts, but I want you to look at, you know, can you get out of your real estate contract, even, you know, assuming that your staff wouldn't all quit if they had to keep working from home all the way through July of 2022. Anyway, those are my limited reactions. Commissioner Lee. You're muted, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since I have to leave in a few minutes, I just want to express my views. I think any of the options is a bitter pill to, you know, to swallow. So I do agree that enforcement right now is the top priority for me and for the city. And I would also propose that we do what, you know, other governments do. Is that, okay, you have to do something, you know, against your will. maybe we can attach a signing separate statement of sorts to really express our dismay, to protest what we have to do, but also outline what we expect to move forward throughout the budgetary process. So I would propose that we prioritize the enforcement aspect and also do a signing statement or public statement or what have you to be at least on the record. So people do not think that, oh, we're making a choice. We're making a difficult choice. However, these are our principles. Regardless of the budget, these are the principles that we will continue to guide the commission throughout the next budgetary process or the ongoing process.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you, Commissioner Lee. And yes, she had advised me that she was going to have to leave at a certain point for another meeting. So thank you for that feedback. I might be in touch with you in between this meeting and the next one, though, Commissioner Lee, to talk about drafting the protest statement, because I think, I mean, I'd be happy to work on that with you, but it'd be something that we know would want to bring to the commission, but at least, you know, we could highlight that. And I think on the op-ed, I would be happy to work with Commissioner Bush and then Commissioner Chu. If we can share both of those in advance with you, then maybe you can provide feedback at the commission meeting, you know, specific editorial comments, if that
Absolutely.
would work, since I know you have a full-time job and full-time kids, so we'll give you the editor's pen. But Commissioner Bush, if I can count on you to work on an op-ed, and we'll have to figure out where our consensus is on ethics at work, because I would want to highlight the importance of training and education. So we need to both go back and look at Director Pelham's more specific proposal so we can be clear about what we're talking about. And then Commissioners Chu and Bush, if you can please give Director Pelham feedback now on A through D, if you have any at this time. Commissioner Bush, I see your hand up.
In terms of the Form 700s, I think that immediately we should ask for the April filings that are being done on paper to be submitted to ethics in a PDF. There's no reason why we have to wait a year to make these electronic when at least the public will know who it is that's having to file and at least see a paper document of what it is that they're filing. I would suggest that those be organized by department rather than alphabetically, because that's where most people are going to want to go. But I think that that's very doable. They're already filling them out and submitting them to their commission secretary. So that would be.
I want to ask you about that, because I'd heard about that before. And so before I forget, the staff would have to look into this. I mean, it seems to me we could assign that if the mayor or the other commissions that are involved could assign that task to their department staff who are collecting those. I happen to know, working for the city, you can take a whole stack of paper and you can put it in the top of a Xerox machine, for lack of a better word, and it'll make a PDF of every one of those pages. But why don't we protect our staff and have the PUC and DPW, you know, be directed by the mayor, who has some control, you know, of either the commissions, and ask them to post on their websites, which they all maintain. And then what we could have on our website is just a note that says, if you want to see all of the filers at all of these departments go to this list of websites. That would be like one thing that we would do, as opposed to if they all send us, somebody, us, not me, copies of 3,600 PDFs, and then it's somebody at Ethics' job to get them all organized and posted on our website. That's work that we're spending our time and resources doing when they could much more easily do that.
I like your idea. I
So,
would support.
I don't know if they'd object, but if you can think about that, Director Pelham, and get back to us at the 12th so we can talk about what the logistics. And I mean, when I did think, I mean, because these are filed, they're public records, so there shouldn't be any issue about, posting them. But anyway, okay. So Commissioner Bush, so back to A through D, do you have any specific, aside from your very thoughtful and lengthy comments, which I'm sure provides feedback, but did you have any final comments on what you want to see coming back to us on the 12th?
I would just recommend a close look at the proposals that are different from mine, but intriguing and worthwhile from Esther Marks. I don't know if all the commissioners are aware of Esther Marks' experience, but she was a member of the Board of Permit Appeals for a number of years, and she's been a treasurer of a number of campaigns for both candidates and ballot measures. And she's well versed in ethics and in the reality of government work and political work. And so she offers insights that are something that we should welcome hearing. That's my point.
All right, thank you. And then Commissioner Chu, did you have any final comments? And then we do need to ask for public comment.
Yeah, I'll be brief. Thank you, Chair Ambrose. I would concur with the priority of preserving the enforcement and audit function. So, and the importance of maintaining forward momentum in Form 700 filings. So would be aligned, Chair Ambrose, with your remarks earlier. And I would also be interested to understand and to have a little more information at our next meeting about simply doing the hiring freeze of the 4 positions. And in the corporate world, the first things that leaders do when there's a budget shortfall is to stop new positions from coming in, but in order to be able to preserve the workforce as it is today, and then we certainly have the staff on hand to do the work as it's currently contemplated. We could do more work if we brought on those four new hires, but if those could cover the $733,000 in salary and budget reductions, I would be interested in exploring that as well.
Okay. I'm going to shift to Mr. Contreras and ask you to read the instructions for members of the public who may want to comment, so that we can find out if anyone's out there. Thank you.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. Those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you have joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 3, presentation, public hearing, and possible action on Ethics Commission budget priorities for the fiscal year 2022, July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Stand by. Madam Chair, we have callers in the queue.
Excellent. Now I have to find my place in the script. If you can please bring the colors on, that would be great.
Welcome. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now. Welcome, caller. Can you hear us? Okay, I'm going to go to the next caller. Hold on, please.
I had heard in the past that there were people who had problems communicating with us.
Okay. Please stand by. Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, but it's very echoey.
Yeah, I don't know what the problem is, but so yeah, it is. I don't know what the problem is.
Okay.
It's okay. Go ahead. We can handle it.
Okay. Well, first, I have enjoyed the discussion, and I am encouraged that the commission will be proactively advocating for their department budget. I wanted to put in perspective, though, what was, and I'll quote from the budget and legislative analyst audit. He writes, department planning tools communicate goals but do not demonstrate effectiveness of core ethics functions. And I think within city government, that's a major limitation of the Ethics Commission. They are not taken seriously, not considered a department where concerns can be dealt with. So that's why I feel that it's especially important that the area of investigation and enforcement take priority. I'm sorry, but I disagree about the Form 700. When you look at that as an example, the former director of Department of Public Works did not list on his Form 700, the gifts that he received that are now, under investigation. So unfortunately, because the department is not considered effective, I think, the culture is people can disclose whatever information they want and not suffer any consequences. Also, the issue of the length of time for any investigation to be carried out is another limitation. As an example, one of the former members of the Ethics Commission had filed a complaint in 2016, and it still has not been resolved. So when things like that happen, it's hard for the department to be taken seriously. So I think you have to focus your activities on investigation and focus activities and budget on investigation and enforcement so that you will be viewed in a different light. I don't know how much more time do I have. I can't. Well. So that for me, that is my main point.
Thank you, caller. And I'm sorry, caller, just to let you know, it could help also if you have a computer that was, if you can mute your computer, if we continue to speak.
Maybe I'll email you about how I do that, because I don't know. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, caller. Okay. And it looks like, yeah, that was the one caller that we had in the queue.
Okay.
Hold on just one second. I'm sorry, Chair. Okay. Once again, if you have just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 3, presentation, public hearing, and possible action on Ethics Commission budget priorities for the fiscal year 2022, July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2022. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by. Madam Chair, we have no further callers in the queue.
All right, thank you very much. Public comment is closed on agenda item number 3. Director Pelham, did you have any further comments or materials to present on this item before we move to the final item?
Excuse me. No, thank you, Chair Ambrose. I don't. I think the Commission's feedback has been very, very instructive and helpful. So we'll look forward to capturing those notes, following up with you, and providing the information as fully as we can at the next meeting. If there's any further, input or questions that any of you have for me individually, I'm more than happy to answer them offline after the meeting or anytime. So no, I don't have anything further at this time.
Okay. And just to follow up, I am going to reach out to Commissioner Lee to work on a statement. What did she call it? A signing statement where we say that we're submitting it because we're required to, but we don't support the reduced budget, as well as an outline of a op-ed that would follow along and be more publicly directed, as opposed to directed at the mayor's budget analyst and the board of supervisors between now and I guess the 9th, which is the day that before the 9th, so that whatever draft we might want to circulate would be part of the public agenda package. And so because 2 of us can't work with the 3rd, Commissioner Chu, you would see those when the document went public, and then my request to you would be to take out your red pen and clean them up and fix them to the extent that you have time to do that, and bring that to the meeting, and then we can get comments from everybody on that. I think, I don't know about you, but I like things that are short and to the point. If I'm going to read letters to the editor, I'm not going to read a book. I want somebody to, to be what you said, bold and clear. So we'll work on that. With that, I'm going to ask that we move to agenda item number 4, which is an additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. If any member of the public intend to offer public comment for this item, they should dial in now and enter *3 to be added to the public comment. And if you could, Mr. Moderator, if you could provide the instructions to folks on how to call in for additional public comment.
Madam Chair, we are checking to see if there are callers in the queue. For those already on hold, please continue to wait until the system indicates you have been unmuted. If you've just joined this meeting, we are currently on the public discussion on the motion of agenda item number 4, additional opportunities for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda pursuant to the Ethics Commission Bylaws, Article 7, Section 2. If you have not already done so, please press *3 to be added to the public comment queue. You will have 3 minutes to provide your public comment, 6 minutes if you're online with an interpreter. You will hear a bell go off when you have 30 seconds remaining. Please stand by.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have a caller in the queue.
Thank you.
Welcome, caller. Your 3 minutes begins now. Okay, it's the same individual who made the public comment earlier. You were on here twice, once with a telephone number and one with just your name. You still have your hand up, but I'm seeing that there is, this attendee is not paying attention with an exclamation mark. It was the same individual from before. Maybe she was on here twice. Maybe that's why we had the echoing going on, and maybe she just didn't shut off. This one, we're not getting no response from her. Caller, are you there? Madam Chair, there are no more callers in the queue. You are muted, Chair Ambrose.
Thank you. Public comment on agenda item number 4 is closed. I'm going to call agenda item number 5, which is adjournment. Commissioners, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Need a second, Commissioner Bush? Thank you. Seconded by Commissioner Bush. And on the motion moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting, moderator, will you please call the roll?
A motion has been made and seconded to adjourn the meeting. I will now call the roll. Commissioner Bush.
Yes.
Commissioner Chu.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee.
She's been excused.
Oh, Chair Ambrose.
Had to leave the meeting. Thank you.
Chair Ambrose.
Yes, I agree. We should adjourn. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all back here on the 12th. I'll be in touch with a couple of you in between now and then. And everyone bask in the glory of our new administration. Have a good week. Take care. Bye-bye.